What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Folks, we are in the home stretch. 2025 NFL Draft just a few days away. Super excited about the week. This is my favorite time of the year. I know Nick feels the same way. Today's podcast is us just putting the finishing touches, the bow, if you will, on our draft prep. We're going to talk some Steelers draft strategy, trade scenarios, the cornerback class, mid-round running backs, some of our favorite scouting reports that we filed like later in the process, throwing some names out there that maybe we didn't have the chance to discuss over the course of the last several months during the process. But I'm really excited about that. In essence, this is going to be a grab bag of draft fun. But first, Nick, how you doing today, brother?
I'm doing great, man. It's almost to the point where you're waking up on Christmas Eve or waking up on Christmas and seeing what Santa's gonna get for you under the tree. You know, have I been naughty or have I been nice? Am I gonna get my favorite players, or am I gonna get some players I'm not so keen on? Yeah, some coal, so to speak.
Yeah. Just before we get started, reminder. My top 100 big board is going to be released hopefully Wednesday morning. I'm going to be streaming right here live on Thursday and Friday before the picks start rolling in. Still getting an itinerary together. I'm pretty busy this week, but it's going to be a lot of fun. So stop by, talk some ball, get ready for the draft. For my channel members, John Ledyard of Yen Zone Ball podcast and myself are going to be doing a Steelers NFL draft collab probably tomorrow night. So if you're a real sicko, you can't get enough of this type of content. The link to become a channel member is in the description of all my videos. And just as always, if you guys could like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. I sincerely appreciate it. Love you guys. Here we go. So first topic that we really wanted to get to, Nick, is actually something that I asked the other Nick Faribault, when he was here on Friday. If you guys haven't checked that video out, please do. But I wanted to just talk about what a successful draft weekend looks like for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I wanted to get your opinion on some of the things that they need to come away with for you to feel like they got better. So what are those things in your opinion?
So I think Dane Brugler kind of puts this really well. This is a starters draft. This isn't a stars type of draft. And the way I look at it in this class is I would like to see the Steelers come away with 3 starting players for the foreseeable future that we can feel comfortable about. Now, a lot of this may depend on, you may take this as a, okay, so if they do it at a position you might not be as big of a fan of, it should be fine. Yes, in hindsight. But for me, I think it comes down to, putting the successor to Cam Hayward in place. I think that comes first more than anything, or like a nose tackle that can put Keanu Benton back at defensive end, take him out of the nose tackle spot. You need those types of players that you can feel comfortable about, that can be potential building chips towards a championship down the road. I'm not so sure about the win now mindset that they have right now with the Aaron Rodgers thing. It's such a not perplexing, because I understand going in on a win now mode with the players that they have, but at this point in time, it just feels like it's becoming a little too late. I also believe that, finding a starting slot cornerback, I'm very glad that Nick hit on this so often, because I believe that the starting slot has just been neglected for years and years and years. It just hasn't gotten that guy since Mike Hilton left. Cam Sutton was fine at one point, when he first took over as the slot guy, but it just hasn't really, he's too old now. He has no legs, and Beanie Bishop, while he had some promising plays, he still looks a little bit too scheme limited, and there's a lot of questions, surrounding him. You can't just hand him the job next year. So that definitely have to come away with a guy like that. Just no matter, I also believe this, come away with an instant contributor at running back, which I don't think is going to be hard. It would
be hard not to do it, honestly.
Even in my failed draft scenarios, I have the Steelers walking away with an instant contributor at running back. And that's how confident I feel about the depth of this class and the amount of guys that you can just hang your hat on, really feel comfortable about taking.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with what you're saying. They are caught a little bit in the middle of kind of, with an aging defensive roster, and then they've got a lot of young pieces on offense, don't have the quarterback. So it's definitely like a team in transition. I would agree with you. I think Daniel Jeremiah actually used to talk about this back when, I don't know, I was probably listening to him on NFL Network starting when I was probably in 11, 12 years old. But he used to say that like when he was with the Ravens, they used to talk about like what defined a good draft. And it was finding 3 starters and maybe like a special teamer on top of that. Like that's true for every year, but I think this year, like that's really like the goal, just because there's not as much like blue chip or first round caliber talent at the top of the draft, which is going to be why we're going to talk about some trade down scenarios as it relates to the Steelers. But for them, I do agree. Like you just look at the roster, like they don't have, like they're missing a starter along the defensive line. It should not be very difficult to find an early contributor at that spot. It's one of the deepest positional groups in the draft. And speaking of like deep positional groups, running back, like you said, it's going to be difficult for them to not come away with a good player there. I mean, this is like this is an all-time running back class. You can say what you want about like positional value or anything like that, but like running backs, they do matter at least to an extent. And everybody, like whatever flavor you want, you're going to be able to access it here. And then the final thing I think that we kind of agree on, kind of going into like what would be a failure or a bad draft weekend, is really just avoiding reaching on a quarterback. And I think that that's one of the things that you kind of look back in retrospect at 2022, when they actually did that, it was kind of, definitely a bust and something that they probably regret. Hopefully, they take good lessons from that, because, every team misses in the first round. The quarterback position is extremely difficult to evaluate. I would say that there aren't any good teams really at doing it. It's just when you hit, it normally means you don't need one for a decade, which is really nice. And could that happen in this class? Sure. I'm not, cocky to think that I couldn't be wrong on any of these guys.
Yeah.
I would be really surprised, man. So what would constitute as a really bad draft weekend from a Steelers perspective in your eyes?
Jackson Dart at 21, pretty much, I would say. But like just reaching for a quarterback, like even I'm not so keen on like taking Shedeur Sanders at 21. I totally get why they would do it, and I think it makes sense from a logistics perspective. I just kind of view his flaws as a little bit more concerning and long term than many other guys in this class, and that's just what really concerns me. Like if you're looking at him as a potential like starter in the league, I could see him being like a journeyman type of starter where he's like consistently able to hang around in the league, and I definitely think he can do that. I think some of the concerns with like he's just not a rotational thrower, and that really bugs me a lot because those type of like throwers, they tend to struggle the most in the NFL, because when you're throwing, this is something I noticed with Shedeur, is whenever he is opening like wide to his right or to his left, he has a hard time of just generating consistent like rotation. Like you can see it sometimes in some of the throws he makes, but it's towards those outbreaking throws. And that's why you see like a good number of like, passes that might not be quite on the number, or passes that are just like hanging up in the air too long and just kind of lacks that torque. So I think that's more concerning. The accuracy is just it's going to keep him in the league for so long. Accurate quarterbacks always stick around, and I think that's a huge part of it. But in terms of like, what the Steelers would do with like a failed draft, like I think reaching too high for like a wide receiver, for instance, I think the wide receiver at like the day 2 part of this group is a little bit more, there's a lot more risk attached to a lot of these guys. And I think if they take one of those guys, like hoping that they can be an instant contributor, I think they might find themselves a little bit in the Roman Wilson situation where they just don't really feel comfortable putting them on the field. And I just think there's a lot of concerns surrounding that group. I prefer the day 3 crop if they were to take a wide receiver at this point.
Yeah, I was on All Steelers Talk today talking about this kind of with Noah. Is like, there's all these people out there that are saying like, oh, there's no such thing as a bad wide receiver class. And maybe that is true just because of the nature of the sport. But I just think in comparison to previous crops, man, like it is a below average group. I think the day 2 guys that you're talking about all have question marks. And not to say like previous crops of players don't, but I do think that there are more like potential red flags or death nails, if you will, with these players. Like, for
There's
example,
a lot of trapdoors.
yeah, even with the guys that they brought in, right? Like Jaden Higgins, like good player, automatic on back shoulders, really good hands, pretty like he's definitely polished from a route running perspective, doesn't separate. Guys that don't separate in college typically don't separate in the NFL. That's just the reality of it. Jalen Noel, a guy that I think has like really been like a social media darling. I actually prefer him to a guy like Roman Wilson last year. But again, it's like, how is he getting on the field and what role is he going to produce for an NFL offense? I see the burst off the line of scrimmage. I see the verticality. There's a little bit of shades of Christian Kirk there, but I don't see like the separation ability underneath, and he's not really a yards after catch player. So when you talk about a guy with like historically small arm length, like get fatal trap doors. Like even and I mentioned Savion Williams earlier today too. Like do I see the upside? Like with the leaping ability, he can high point the football. Like
he
can
might be a
actually
running
get off.
back.
Yeah, he can get off press coverage. There's some really quick transition to being a runner, and like he's just really fun to watch with the ball in his hands. Super. I mean, there's nobody in the class that makes it look more unnatural just catching the football when he's open. It looks like a beach ball is headed his direction. That's like the way I described it in my scouting report. So I mean, they come with way more significant question marks than like last year's class did, in my opinion. And like for the most part, I think last year's class produced pretty well as rookies. And not saying that these guys can't either. It's just not one of my favorite crops. I would prefer to invest my picks in the defensive tackles, in the running backs, even corner. I think that the day 2 crop of corners is pretty good. We can talk about those as well. So, yeah, good discussion there just about first round strategy. But speaking of first round, there's been a lot of talk about the Steelers trading down out of that 21 spot, something you and I have like talked religiously about over the past several months. But Adam Schefter had named the Steelers specifically as a team that would be interested in trading down, like potentially down from the first round or maybe out of the first round altogether. Before we talk about like some of our specific maybe trade down scenarios or like hauls or like thought process with that, is there any player that would be available at 21 overall that you just would not trade away from?
I feel like this is a very hard question because there are players that make me consider it, like Walter Nolan, Derek Harmon. I have very high grades on both of them. They're both realistic targets at that point of the draft. I think those guys are pretty tough for me to move on from because as I get a little bit, towards the day 2 crop, I look at a guy like Darius Alexander who's similar, but he's a lot older.
Mm-hmm.
And I go to like the team timeline of where this team is right now. And if they're in a win now mode, yeah, it might make sense to take a Darius Alexander, but
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know if they're in that timeline, and I don't know if it's going to necessarily fit completely in that mold. Honestly, like I don't even think it would even happen. But Ashton Janty's like the one where I'm just like, he's there. I can't trade down from that.
Yeah.
There's not a ton of players in this class where I feel to myself where I'm like, okay, I can I don't want to move off this pick. I want to stay exactly where I am. And I think that's a lot of that. A lot of teams takes 2 to tango when it comes to
Oh yeah.
trade.
It's
To
going to be
trade
difficult,
downs.
I feel like, to trade down in this class. I forget like where the stat came from, but I think that this is the furthest into the draft cycle that we haven't had a team make a trade in the first round ever. And like a
Yes.
lot of that just is, it echoes a lot of the things we've talked about over the past several months. There's not a lot of first round grades, so it's going to be very team specific. The boards I think are going to be vastly different, even more so now than usual amongst these teams. And I do think it's going to be difficult to kind of trade down. The wild card here is the quarterbacks, right? Like how much of this smoke around some of these day 2 guys is legitimate? Jalen Milroe, Jackson Dart. Does the league, or are there enough fans of them to really like trade up into the first round to take these guys? New Orleans has been a team that's been, linked to Jackson Dart. It seems like that's gained more smoke. I want to talk about that. But for me, in terms of prospects, I wouldn't trade away from. There's really not any that come to mind that I think are super realistic. Walter Nolan's a top 10 player for me in the class, but I don't actually think that the Steelers are all that interested in him just based on what I've gathered. We'll see. I just haven't really been able to get like a for sure confirmation that like he's not off their boards, because he is off other teams' boards. And even then, like if you're talking about trading back, like how many teams in the first round would even take Walter Nolan in the first round? I don't know. He's a very polarizing player to really get a
lot
beat
of
on.
buzz about the 49ers right now with
Yeah.
Walter Nolan.
And it feels like Derek Harmon might not even be available at 21, but then I saw something today saying that there may be some medical stuff with him, which wouldn't surprise me. Not because I have any inside information on his medicals, but because he was a really heavy dude when he was at Michigan State. He was over 350 pounds when he got to college. And typically guys like that have to undergo pretty significant body transformations do have like some lingering type of stuff with them. So that could be something. The other player I think we should mention is like Matthew Golden, depending on where he is. Golden is a player to me that I think is going to be like a really high-end wide receiver too at the next level. My comparison for Golden was kind of like he's like Santonio Holmes-ish to me, in some of the ways that they move and some of just the skill sets that they have. I think the Steelers would probably they would definitely entertain him if he's there at 21. I don't know if he is, but I just think trading down without that second round pick, like you just look at all the visitors that they've had over the course of the draft cycle. And like a lot of these guys are day two players, man, aside from Shadur, aside from Derek Harmon, if you really consider Jackson Dart a first round quarterback, aside from those guys, like it's really difficult to nail down where they could be really, really have their eyes on right now.
I think they're going to be keen on Kenneth Grant. I don't quite have a first round grade on him, but I definitely get the first round love for him. Like it makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. I've said for a long time that I think Harmon is the Steelers' #1 interior defensive lineman, but it wouldn't shock me if Kenneth Grant wasn't far behind. And both of those guys, I think they would consider at 21. Let's go through some trade down scenarios and hauls, if you want. Let's like one of the things that I had talked about. Finding a trade partner is not necessarily going to be the easiest thing in the world, but I was doing some research. The Saints, I already mentioned, kind of been connected with Jackson Dart. It seems like they may actually prefer him maybe over Shadur Sanders. Who knows? Could be smoke. But they could be a team that maybe doesn't want to spend number 9 on Dart, but could come back up in the first round to get him. I was doing some research. The Broncos actually traded up in 2010 from a similar spot with the Baltimore Ravens. They gave up number 43 overall, a 3rd round pick, and a 4th round pick for number 25. So you're looking at a really similar range. I actually went and looked up like the picks that they have, and turns out like they've got multiple 3rd round picks and multiple 4th round picks. So they kind of are. And the Saints over time, man, like if you actually look at it, they've never been shy about trading up. It is very much like F them picks. And I don't necessarily think that's been a very good thing for them. It has not worked.
The Ricky Williams example back in the
well, I'm just saying, like, even like recent examples. Didn't they trade up for Davenport? Remember when they did that and gave up like a
I thought that was Lamar at the time. I really thought that was going to be Lamar.
I did as well. But there was just a lot of stuff there with that. So I definitely think that they could be involved with that. So like in this scenario, if the Steelers move back 21 all the way to 40, and that is a pretty significant haul, the value of the picks actually matches up to where they could get pick 40, pick 71, and pick 112. Pretty solid, man. It would give you, you still don't necessarily have like the second round, another second round pick, but you would have 2/3 and 2/4. And then that would ultimately give you about 5 picks in the top 125. And ultimately, I think when I looked at the health of the roster, like you said, coming away with this draft with 3 starters is just my priority. So I really like that trade down scenario. We can kind of, I wanted to kind of talk through if you had any teams in mind before we get to specific players that we would be targeting in a trade down situation.
I think you and I can both agree on this one. The Giants are probably the most interesting one because they did the most work on Shadur Sanders by far out of any team. And yeah, there's everyone thinks it could be like as high as number 3 or like the floor is like number 21 to the Steelers. And I was reading like Schefter's article and he kind of talked about, is there a chance like that he could fall past 21? And I kind of thought that was interesting. Maybe the Steelers, like their interest in Shadur is more of like a trade magnet to get the Giants to move up. And I think if they get that, I mean, they have that like I believe it's like that 60th overall pick that they can offer. Not
Mm-hmm.
just that, like if you're moving up for a quarterback, you might be able to get some like
It's a good point.
higher compensation. And a lot of people view the 2026 draft, it could be more of a marquee draft. And when you go towards like the picks of that draft and how the Steelers have been, prioritizing capital in terms of how they've, managed their potential compensatory picks for that year,
Mm-hmm.
I really like a potential trade down where they get one of those picks in 2026, not just like trying to recoup that second round pick they lost, but
Yeah.
also looking to the 2026 draft to add that capital to further like increase like your potential options at that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, it's a good point. The QB tax, as we call it, oftentimes like the trade value and stuff, when you go look at these charts, and a lot of these are compiled over examples in recent history, right? Like you want to try to see like what these teams are actually trading when they're attempting to move up and down the draft. But there is a tax on quarterbacks, like you said, because it's the most important position. So the Steelers really are dead set on like, hey, let's push this thing down another year, compile as many, starters as we can in this draft, and then, try to make a move in 2026 for whoever at quarterback. I think that does make a lot of sense. Just in general, you look at the list of like pre-draft visitors, man, and like guys that they could potentially get if they got another, second round pick or early third round pick. It would just allow them to fill some serious needs for the future. Even one that we'll talk about with cornerback, Azarie Thomas, Trey Amos, guys like that I think are pretty good scheme fits for the Steelers. Longer corners. Amos has the ball production. Thomas has the press man experience on an island. Those guys, like if you were able to acquire like a top 50, top 60 pick, they could actually be guys that maybe are there at that point in the draft. We've already talked about the Caleb Johnson. Like he's a great scheme fit, but even then, we know the Steelers are going to take a quarterback in some form or fashion. Like if they were to trade back into the second round and still get a quarterback, maybe that's, Jalen Milroe, like at 40, if they traded back with the Saints. Like I don't think that that's the worst thing in the world. But having said that, maybe that's not realistic because I think if they really liked Milroe that much, they would just take him at 21. That would kind of surprise me.
I feel like Milroe's floor is going to be 33 to the Browns because
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Because don't they have Tommy Reese as their offensive coordinator? And I remember I was listening to Andrew Berry talk about like Travis Hunter and Jalen Milroe, and he was talking about Milroe and like how he might be a more explosive runner.
I did see that, yeah.
Even Lamar. And I'm like, I think there's smoke there. I think that could be the floor for Milroe.
Yeah. But I mean, the reason I say that is because I just feel like it's inevitable that they're going to take one of these quarterbacks. It's just a matter of where. Could it be Will Howard in the third round? Could it be Kyle McCord, who we can talk about a little bit? So the problem with that philosophy right now is with them only having 6 draft picks, it's difficult. I understand continuing to take swings on a quarterback in the third, fourth round because you may get to a situation the second half of the season where it's like, okay, whether Rodgers, like he's completely cooked because of his age, or whether it's one of those things where you actually do have to roll with Mason Rudolph. You obviously don't want him starting the entire year. Maybe you can give those guys an 8-game sample size audition to say like, okay, like show us something, like show us we enough to believe in you as the guy moving forward, or if it's not, you either have your backup or a potential like trade piece for the offseason. So I think that those are I just think that we need to prepare for a quarterback being taken in the third, fourth round, even if it's not one of the highly touted guys that could probably get overdrafted, if we're being completely honest.
Definitely.
Let's talk a little bit about the quarterback class. I dropped my cornerback rankings for Steelers. Now, I just wanted to get your thoughts on the class overall. Maybe some players you wanted to highlight or specifics for the Steelers.
This is a tough group to rank at the top. The reason I say that is because there are so many like guys who are injured or have like testing concerns over like their potential like recovery speed in those aspects. Like we don't have numbers on Will Johnson, and he's been hurt throughout most of the process. I still really like the tape. I still want to bet on it, and I still believe that he's going to be a very good player. But then you have like, potential scheme concerns as well. Like Jahdae Barron, I love this player. I think he plays extremely tough. I think he's extremely smart. I think he knows exactly what he's doing. I just have barely any reps of this guy playing man coverage. because they're playing so much cover 3, cover 2 zone. Like, it's just consistent. Like, him playing in like a shuffle technique. He's not in a pedal at all. So you don't really have that type of sample on a player like that. And it really concerns me, taking a corner who might be a little more scheme limited. We don't know. Just because they were asked to do it doesn't necessarily mean, they weren't asked to do it. Doesn't mean they necessarily can't do it. But I think that's important to keep in mind, with taking a corner in this class. And then you have guys like Savon Ravel. It's actually Savon. The H is silent. I was surprised by that. Out of Eastern Carolina, and he's the guy I wanted to bet on the most, but I just couldn't because there's no tape of him playing against receivers who are even slightly starting caliber. So he's just playing in this like trail technique consistently because he knows he's just going to win back in the recovery phase every single time. It's actually insane, but like he's hurt this past year. He's coming off an injury and he's also going to be 24. So you have those type of concerns. Maxwell Hairston, he's another guy who was hurt this past year. He got the test, but like his missed tackle numbers, they went through the roof. And there's so much like highs and lows on that tape where you just don't know whether this guy, is going to be consistent enough at the next level. And then this one's the most frustrating. Benjamin Morrison. This dude is a high cut corner, doesn't have the longest arms, but he has pristine technique in press man coverage. We saw, games against him against Marvin Harrison, just a bunch of guys that he has experience with. And he has some of the best tape, but he's a poor tackler in so many aspects. He's mostly limited to like press man and like, those bump and run cover 2s. You don't see him playing off man coverage very often. He doesn't look like the most smooth, but he's just really good at being able to like feel out receivers and kind of dictate where they're going to go, which is a good aspect. But then you put into the fact that he has suffered a hip injury this past year, and there's not as much 2024 tape. That becomes concerning because he's kind of built like he's high cut, but he's like almost thin, and he looks small trying to take on, players in run support or just tackling in general in space. And that really concerns me at the next level. So this corner class is it's really concerning at the top. I have so many issues ranking it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned with Morrison, it is a tough eval because he's had multiple hip injuries now, and hip injuries probably not good. I mean, that body part's pretty important for a cornerback position. I do like he's really battle tested, man. They trusted him on an island on that defense. He's got pretty good short area bursts. I think he gears down pretty well with stop routes. Again, the experience is definitely there with him, but I'm concerned about the lack of play strength. And that's highlighted too, because he had a shoulder injury too. So like, it's not just the hip. It's about like whether his body's going to hold up. You mentioned Savon Revel. That is another one that is really difficult to judge because he didn't play very good competition. And honestly, I didn't really think he dominated the competition. So like, I'll put him at 7 in my cornerback rankings. Would still be fine with taking a flyer on him in the second round at some point. But again, it's going to be a really difficult transition. Maxwell Harrison is an interesting one because like he's got jetpacks on his cleats. I mean, that dude is a really, really gifted mover. I mean, the recovery speed, just the in-out quicks, the burst out of the transition, the plant drive phase, really impressive. I mean, don't leave the ball late around that kid because it's headed back the other way. Issues with him is like you said, the tape is super volatile. I mean, there are big plays all over the place. I mean, the Louisville game is a bloodbath.
Yeah,
it is a bloodbath. But I mean, there's a lot of talent there for sure with him. And another guy, like, it's really difficult because you mentioned the injury stuff. I think honestly, it's that and it's the testing. Because Zaire Thomas, like I thought he was like a 4.5 flat type of corner. He ends up running on 4.58. That's a historical outlier. This is a stopwatch position. So as much as I love the tape, I did knock him down a little bit just because it's hard to bet on that in the first round specifically, which is where I would have had him if he would have ran the 4.5. But And then there's other guys who tested extremely well, but they get beat all the time. Like Jade Barrett, like you mentioned, playing from like off coverage. He was playing out on the boundary. I anticipate he's going to move it to the slot. His real calling card is versatility. But guys got behind him in the SEC last year, like even playing off coverage. Same thing with Trey Amos. Like Amos is a guy, like I thought he was at least going to be like a low 4.5s guy. He ends up running like a 4.43. Guys in the SEC ran past him all the time. So it is difficult to parse out like what's real, like what's the real play speed of these guys in addition to the injuries. And with Amos, I do love just like his instincts and zone coverage are outstanding. I mean, he peels off and makes awesome plays on the football. He's got really good timing and length at the catch point. So there are a lot of guys on day 2 that I would be really excited about. I think if the Steelers do get an additional day 2 pick, I would love to snag whether it's like Thomas or Amos or even my guy Justin Wally, one of those guys to kind of allow them to kind of, come in, not pressed into the starting lineup right away. They can learn behind a guy like Darius Slay who's been there, done that. You know what I'm saying? So, but it's a solid class for sure. It's more day 2 talent and dart throws really than like proven day 1 starters, though, in my opinion.
Yeah. And in terms of some slot options, I mean, Upton's stat on day 3, like that guy showed up to the Senior Bowl and
Jacob Parrish.
Yes, Parrish is.
I like Jacob Parrish. I'm surprised. I am surprised that they have not shown more like obvious interest in him, man. Like tons of man coverage reps. He played outside. He played in the slot. Like he can battle through bunches. He can play stacks. He can follow. He's battle tested
too. Like he played against guys like Ted McMillan. He had good reps versus like all those.
And
guys.
the Iowa State guys. I mean, everybody. Like I said, I was almost tweeted this out yesterday, but like everybody loves Jalen Noel. Like he had. I really felt like for the most part, like he had Noel and Higgins in a box. It just so confusing. He's a guy who I thought this past year on tape was more willing to get involved in the run. He'd come downhill, he'll stick his face in the fan. So yeah, I'm kind of surprised that they haven't had more of an interest in him. I would take Jacob Parrish in the early 3rd round all day long.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I'm actually interested though, like we obviously have a good opinion of Justin Wally. Where do we think he ends up going in this draft? Because like his buzz got so late in the process. I don't know if he's one of those guys that like we kind of like get onto his tape and we're like excited, and then he ends up going towards like the day 3 part of the draft. Like, how would you?
Yeah, I mean, the consensus board has him at like 227, so they have him behind like plumbers and future pharmacists. So like, I don't know. I think everybody in the world except like me, you, and a couple other like film nerds think that Justin Wally is just a complete bum. But I think he's going to play at the next level, man. I really do. I think he's going to play early, and I think he's going to have a long career. We'll see. He's definitely somebody that I did an article. I think it was over the weekend about the 5 most like underrated draft prospects in the class, and Wally was in there. Like he was the one that had the biggest difference between like my grade and how consensus saw him. But yeah, Wally's going to be in my top 100 big board. Like I did see right before we jumped on, I saw Dana Jeremiah release his top 100 big board. Justin Wally, 95.
Hey, let's go.
So I don't know, man. DJ knows his stuff. So we'll see. It is weird though, because when somebody doesn't get any type of buzz, like Dane Brugler has him as a 6th round pick. Some of the other Lance Zierlein, I think, has him in that kind of same category too. Don't quote me on that one, but yeah, I don't know. I'm excited that they brought him in for a visit, because it is one of those things where if they aren't able to address it earlier and he does go on day 3, boy, I would be working the phones to make sure I got that kid on my team on day 3 of the draft. If assuming that's where he actually goes, which it does seem like that's realistic. So we'll see. But definitely one of my guys in the class for sure. Let's talk about the running backs real quick. If you had to add one mid-round running back to the Steelers roster right now, who would you add?
So if I had to add a mid-round running back, I don't know. I'm going to actually give you a late-round running back a little bit later, but right now the mid-round running back that I feel the most comfortable with is Dylan Sampson. I'm pretty bullish on his pass protection.
Yeah,
I think he reads things out like incredibly well, even though like he doesn't have experience in that outside zone system. I love the way he presses his blocks. I love the way he manipulates the second level. I feel like he reads things out like a veteran, and I listen to this dude talk, and I think he would just be a player that like you add to your community, and it's helping everyone, not just the team, but the players, the fans. I really think he's going to be one of those guys that like you just really hang your hat on. And I think a lot of, you know, I only have him RB6. I couldn't even put him in my top 5 running backs, and that's speaks to just how good this running back class is. But Samson, for me, the explosive play element in the mid round, like if you describe the third round pick, perfect for third round pick for the Steelers, if Samson ended up being their third round pick, I'm going to be over the moon about that one. I really like him. I really feel like his ability like is going to be like an instant contributor at the next level.
Yeah, I said the same thing, kind of my scouting report on him. Samson was RB7 for me, somebody that I have a third round grade on. You know, he could get skinny through the hole. I mean, his build really helps him with that. Like, he has this natural low center of gravity. He has quick acceleration speed. One of the things I like about him is when he gets it to the second level, man, he has this weird kind of spin move that he does. It's not really super quick, but it's almost like he bounces off of people. Yes. I just like the tempo. I like the pacing. I like the eyes. I actually thought the pass protection was inconsistent game to game, but I am with you where I do see the vision for him actually being able to do it, which gave me enough confidence to put him inside the top 10. The thing that I think probably is going to be most concerning or the biggest question for me is just the scheme itself, because it was really a lot of like power counter out of the gun, and the Steelers don't really run those things. They're more like under center, heavy personnel, outside mid zone, some inside zone out of the gun, the occasional duo from under center. But that's the thing for me. But I do think typically, like when you see college backs and their transition to the NFL, tempo, pacing, vision typically translates.
It translates
with time on task. And I think it may take Samson a little bit to get there, but I'm pretty bullish on like just the style of runner that he is, that it could translate. So you want to shout out a late round back that you like, or did you have another one?
I want to shout out a late round guy that I really like. So I asked a question like a while back on Twitter. I asked who do you guys prefer between Jordan James and Kyle Monangai? And the reason I asked this question, they feel like almost the same exact player, but James is a lot higher on the consensus. The thing with Monangai, he has not fumbled in his entire career. He had like over 600 attempts. He did not fumble once. The last guy who did that, at least off the top of my head, was Kareem Hunt in college. And he runs
kind of similar players.
They run exactly the same. The difference is like he's only 5'8", but he's like rocked up. Like he's a rocked up 211 pounds, and he just like he has muscles on top of his muscles, to put it for a better term. The way he runs, there's just such violence, but there's such like nuance to how he works. Like when he plays at the first level, when he's having to deal with first level penetration consistently from the defensive tackles, and he's making those guys miss, or he is running through them on short like yardage situations, and I really respect that about his game. The way he presses on like outside zone to be able to like read things out. This is one of the like I've seen some backs in this class who kind of take a little bit too wide of an angle. Like their depth is a little bit too far in the backfield on outside zone. They're not able to like get that full press. And Monangai does that extremely well. Another thing I really wanted to talk about, Dane Brugler mentions in like the Beast Guide, like how he's the best dancer on the entire team, on the entire Rutgers team. And it goes down to his ankles. He's got really flexible ankles, and it absolutely plays into like how he plays, because there are instances you wouldn't think it, because he didn't test like very well. Like he ran a 4.6 flat, I believe, and you know, some people might find that disqualifying. I look at the tape, I see this dude bending off his ankles and taking like this very like S-shaped pattern, like a curvy linear pattern, to like beat guys around the edge. And I'm like, there's no way. Like he didn't test that fast. Like, and he's just like beating guys like onto the outside angle. And I just couldn't believe what I was watching. And then you watch him like, you know, gear down and make guys miss. Like he has such innate, like he's a very twitched up player. Like he knows how to like make guys miss with like dead legs, like rocker steps. Like it's just consistent with his game. And I really like that about him. There's a violence like when he runs at the first and second level, obviously, because the contact balance is just unbelievable. If you watch the Washington game, there's a play like backed up at his own goal line, like he gets like outside and then he just starts running through like almost the entire secondary of the team. They could not bring down Manungai at all, just the way he was running. There's just so much violence to how he moves, and I really like that about his game. There's some explosive plays. I really think he's a guy who has that element. I also think the pass protection is like incredible. Like Greg Schiano raves about this dude as a pass protector because he loves it and because he's an insane processor. I actually saw him making the pass protection calls at the line of scrimmage. Like they were like several times in like they're waiting for the play to get called. I see Manungai like he's going up to the line telling him, "Okay, this guy's coming. I'll pick this guy up." Like he knows, like he's got eyes in the back of his head. There's a play against Wisconsin where they shift the protection to the left, and he's coming back on the play action because there's a guy coming on the backside. He comes all the way back and he ends up blocking him. And I just could not believe it. The way he has his hands inside, the demeanor. I really think Manungai is just a guy that just he goes on day 3, he's going to be a starter, and I think he just ends up playing for a long time in this league. I think there's a lot of overthinking going on with him just because of the 4.6 time he put on tape or in testing.
Yeah, I mean, Manungai, real north-south runner. That's kind of like my notes kind of start with that. You mentioned just some of the power that he runs with. Like, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's overwhelming, but he has this like really rugged, I would say, rushing style.
Feet constantly move on contact.
Absolutely. Leg drive, things like that, ability to churn out yards and short yardage. You mentioned the just dependability, not putting the ball on the ground in the passing game as a check down option, not putting the ball in harm's way in terms of like fumbling the ball, the pass protection stuff. Definitely like the want to is really, really there. And I think that that's most of the battle in general for running backs. But I also thought that he picked up games and stunts extremely well. I did think that there were some good examples of him being able to create on his own. I thought that the vision was kind of inconsistent at times, which was one of the knocks that I kind of have for him, especially because I felt like their like rushing scheme was like pretty limited too. Like he didn't get the chance to do as many things as I thought that he probably could do. But I'd like to see him be like maybe a little bit more patient. Like I said, really north-south runner, but there were definitely times where I felt like he would just kind of like lower his head into a pile unnecessarily. But definitely a good back, and kind of just like goes back to what we talked about in the onset of the video. There's going to be good backs, complementary backs, guys that are going to contribute in a rotation available on day 3 of the draft. Like if your team doesn't come away with a useful player in the backfield, it's just because your front office sucks. That's really all it comes down to. Nothing more that needs to be said than that. If they can't get it done in this process, then there's no hope for your franchise. Last one here. Late watches, you got anybody that you wanted to shout out late in the scouting process, prospects that, surprised you or anything like that as we kind of close things down on this cycle?
I just think the entire linebacker class surprised me. Like the day 2 guys, like I feel like Chris Pooh, like I think is how to pronounce it, junior out of Ole Miss. He processes really well. I really like some of his man coverage reps against Mason Taylor, despite the fact like he's a little bit of a stiffer player, but he's just such a smart player. And you can kind of go listen to like the Bootleg Football podcast, but like they had an interview with him and just like the way he breaks down film, the way he breaks down tendencies. That's a guy who's going to play in the league for a while. He's an outlier in terms of the arm length, but he's a guy that just absolutely sees it. I really get it with him. In day 2, I also just like Jack Kaiser. Like Jack Kaiser is a guy who just consistently, he's the leader of that defense. I feel like he has plenty of range to work laterally. Sorry.
You're good.
But Kaiser has that range to work laterally. I like how he takes on blocks, like he's able to navigate through them. He's a guy who just like is smooth in his spot drops. I don't think he did enough of that At Notre Dame, honestly, I think they kind of left his plate a little bit shallow in terms of what he was doing, but he was at the Senior Bowl and he was like executing these like pulls, like these pull runner drops out of Tampa 2. And I was really impressed what I was seeing from Kaiser. But also, I don't give first round grades to linebackers very often. Jahad Campbell is absolutely a first round player
Oh yeah,
on
he's a
tape.
stud.
Yeah. A lot of people are in agreement on that one, but the one that was surprising is Carson Schwessinger out of UCLA. The coverage ability, even like some of the block take on and the way he like navigates through second level, blocks. I really liked what I was seeing with his eyes, his instincts. Some of the plays in coverage are insane. Like he's getting so much depth in his drop in a Tampa 2 zone where like he's almost basically a middle field cover 3 safety with how he's like covering out in space, but also the way he kind of like spaces himself to like be able to pass off and then read route concepts. There's an interception against Iowa where he just like he's playing that Tampa 2 zone. He has the post route like on the backside, but then he reads like the front side play, ends up intercepting it. I just really like the ball skills. I really like everything about his game. Like I was so shocked how good of a player he was in terms of like, because I don't give first round grades to linebackers, but the tape, the testing, all that with Jahad Campbell and Carson Schwessinger, if I'm just going off the tape and the testing, those guys are first round players for me.
Yeah. I would say late round watches for me. I already mentioned Justin Wally is kind of a sleeper day 3 type of option that I'm actually going to have in my top 100. Also mentioned just because I really didn't start watching offensive linemen until about a week or 2 ago, if I'm being honest, because it really just wasn't a priority for me with the Steelers not really projected to pick one early in the draft. Haven't really shown any interest at the position at all. Josh Simmons, really good. It seems like we got good news from a medical standpoint. Like he's going to be in the top 10 for me in terms of just prospects on my draft board. He's just fantastic. The pass protection upside with him is really limitless. I feel like the other guy that I will say, I was just watching him this morning because I'm finalizing like my edge rankings and stuff like that I seem higher on than consensus, is LSU edge rusher Braden Swinson. Dude, he plays balls to the wall, man, and I really do appreciate that about him. I think he's going to outperform a lot of these edge rushers that are going to be taken before he is off the board. Totally I thought the South Carolina game, that was one of the games I wanted to go back and watch today. Hadn't seen that one yet. Dude, it was a nightmare. I mean, he gave them so many fits, man. High side finesse rushes, speed to power, looping on stunts. I mean, he was dominant. And I know he's a little bit of a late bloomer. That's one of the things I think a lot of people critique with him. I would like to personally see him continue to develop some counters to his game. There are some times where offensive linemen will, shut down his initial rush, and he continues to try to surge into the backfield, but it's like he is kind of confused on how he's supposed to use his hands at times at the top. So there's some things that still need refinement, and he's a little bit of a, I guess, more experienced player, but I just really like the game, man. Like he gives his all. Like he's a little bit undersized in the run department, but the physicality, the violence, the hustle, the motor, it's all there with Swinson. And I'm just really confused, honestly, on why he's not viewed like kind of universally as a top 50 player in a class like this. Because I would, if I was a team that needed an edge rusher and didn't have like the capacity to spend a first round pick on one, I would absolutely be targeting this dude with the big Red Bulls out in round 2.
Yeah. He's got a star next to his name, basically. Like that's how you feel about him.
Yeah, absolutely. So I appreciate it, man. It was good talking ball. We appreciate the continued support on the channel. Thank you guys very much. On your way out, please make sure that you like, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications. I will be back tomorrow-ish with John. And then I think tentatively, as long as I can get my big board done, we're going to try to stream some mock draft stuff on Wednesday. I will keep you guys in the loop on that on the channel page. I'll let you guys know what that's all about. But tentatively, I would like to get on here and go through some mock drafts with the PFF simulator, kind of similar to what we did last year. It's all dependent on me getting my work done, but that's the game plan right now. So appreciate the continued support, and I will holler at you guys next time. Peace and love.